This is Will Mitchell from StartupBros, and I wanted to talk about something that I think is very important when it comes to business, but not many people talk about it. And you know, if you're going into the e-commerce business or any type of startup business, right? If you're starting a company from scratch, you really have to know what the product life cycle is and how to kind of intuitively read it and figure out, you know, your business and your customers, where are they at in this life cycle? Because not only is it going to dictate, you know, the kinds of actions you should be taking when starting your business, but it could actually determine the success or failure of your business. So product life cycle, this is kind of, I think, I dropped out of school obviously, but I think this is kind of a business school type of thing. And it's a really good concept that is really important, and I see a lot of people that just don't understand that products have a lifespan, right? Just like human beings. Product ideas and product concepts are born, and they go through a very predictable life cycle until they eventually decline and die, right? So we want to talk about that life cycle. I want to help you kind of, you know, understand what the life cycle is and how businesses change as their products go through this life cycle. I'll show you a few example products so we can talk about, you know, real world examples of how this affects your business. And I also want to take it through these different elements of success or failure, right? The profitability of your business is going to change drastically as we go through this life cycle. The failure rate, right? Your chances of success are going to drastically be altered based on where you're at in this life cycle. So that's what we're going to be looking at here today. So let's just jump into it. Again, as products go through this life cycle, there's really 4 stages that we look at, right? The first stage is what some people call the introduction, and just to give you an idea of what this actually means, this would be your sales, right? This is sales, actual units being sold, right? So as the units being sold is obviously originally going to be at 0 here, this first stage is what a lot of people call the introduction stage. I personally refer to it as the R&D stage, research and development. And what you're basically doing in this stage is figuring out what you're going to sell, right? This is, if I have a brand new product idea, I'm going to be in the R&D stage, and I'm going to be just figuring out what I'm trying to sell and how I'm going to sell it. You know, for an example of a product that stayed in the R&D stage and never got out of the R&D stage, look at something like Google Glasses, right? Google Glasses, there's those little things you wear on your face. It's like an augmented reality computer, had the little camera in it and everything. This product failed. But the reason why it failed, most people don't know, it's because no one knew what the hell Google Glass was or why they wanted it, how it was going to solve any problems for them. So you saw Google spending just a massive amount of advertising dollars trying to educate people as to what Google Glasses were and why they should even care. So it's really tough to advertise products and get people to understand what you're selling if the product doesn't even exist yet, right? So in this first stage, this R&D stage, you're probably not going to have much profitability, right? You're going to have a lot of people lose money in this stage, right? This is the stage of, let's say, Tesla, right? Tesla Motors, they're moving into the growth stage now, but for a long time, electric cars were just this fantastical idea. No one quite knew what they were, why they wanted them. And over the past 10 years, we've seen that market move out of the R&D stage and into the growth stage. But it took a massive amount of research development, investor dollars, right? Tesla's a company that burns through billions and billions of dollars a year with no profitability. So the profitability in a brand new market where there's no competition, right? In a brand new market, there's literally no competition, but that's a bad thing. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs that go out there and look for markets that have no competition. Well, if you're going into a market with no competition, that's a big red flag that something is terribly wrong in that market. And you just don't have customers, right? At this stage, I have to go out there and teach people what my product even is, how it's different from what they understand, right? I'm really teaching people and educating people instead of trying to get them to buy my product. And this is why products in the R&D stage really tough. I mean, a lot of companies never get out of this, right? Super high failure rate in the R&D stage, and obviously a lot of development costs in the R&D stage. Now, once a product moves beyond this, right, and we start to get into this growth phase, well, the growth phase is really where you want to operate, right? The growth phase is where there's a huge rush of customers coming in, right? If we think about LED light bulbs, right? Just a simple product. Well, LED light bulbs, that concept was there for 20, 30 years. It just didn't make sense for anyone to mass produce them. At a certain point, that market moved out, right? At a certain point, people, the general consumer, all of a sudden understood why they wanted LED light bulbs, the energy savings, the fact that you don't have to replace them only have to replace them every 15, 20 years. So as the general market and the general consumer started to understand more and more about LED light bulbs and how they were different from conventional light bulbs, the market just started to go up, right? Customers started flooding the marketplace, and that's where you want to operate, right? I don't want to be the first person to think of an LED light bulb. I want to be the first person to sell them profitably to customers, right? So in the growth phase, this is again where you want to operate, right? In the growth phase, we have massive profitability, peak profitability in the growth phase, right around here, obviously. The failure rate in the growth phase is very low, right? If everybody is buying LED light bulbs, if everybody's buying selfie sticks and you're selling them too, you're very low rate of failure, right? So super low rate of failure in the growth phase, and that's where we really want to catch products and build companies when the market's right here, right? Because then we can capture all of the profitability in this market. The competition is there. It's there in the growth phase. It's not crazy, but it's there. We like competition, right? I like to see competition because that means that people are actually buying things. And day in and day out, more people are buying things if it's in the growth phase. So this is really going to be conducive to new companies starting up, because every single day you wake up, there's going to be more customers ready and willing to buy your products. The development cost in here is pretty flat. It's pretty flat. In the growth phase, the way that we beat the competition is through differentiation, through making improvements to our products, right? And so because of that, there's not a crazy development cost. It's not like we're inventing new things or doing drastic changes to the product. We're making slight alterations. Maybe we're throwing in bundles and bonuses and stuff like this, but we're differentiating through product features, not through price, right? Because as we're going to talk about, once we get into these later stages, people will start to compete on price, and that's where you don't want to be, right? Because that's when the Walmarts of the world will win, is when it's only based on price. So we really want to get started in the growth phase, capture market share while we're in the growth phase, and then through building a good fan base and a good brand and just people that like your products, you're going to be able to kind of extend the product life cycle out and build a successful business. Advertising. Advertising is there again, but it's not huge, because I would even be willing to say that advertising is pretty low at this stage, because people are out there buying the products, right? If you just came out with the first fat burning pill in the world, people are going to be, slamming on your door trying to buy it. So the advertising fee really isn't that high when it's in a growth market, because people are going to be buying them anyways. It's not like you have to spend a huge amount of time and energy and money to convince them to buy yours, because they're buying them anyways, right? There are people flooding into this market because they're hearing about a new product, a trendy product, and they want to buy it. So the only question is, like, what product are they going to look at first that they decide to buy, right? Now, as products and markets move out of the growth phase, we start to get into the maturity phase. And a mature market, this basically means that the market has topped out, right? Everybody who might want an LED light bulb has, they know about LED light bulbs, they've thought about them, and then they've either decided to buy them or not to buy them, right? LED light bulbs are now old news, and it's a mature market. People know what they are, they're familiar with them, they know if they want them, if they don't want them. There's no trendy novelty to it anymore. So in the maturity phase, all of this changes, right? All of this changes. The profitability of your product in the maturity phase is going to be flat. It's not going to be unprofitable, but you're going to see diminishing growth. You're no longer going to be growing as quickly as you were in the maturity stage. The failure rate is much higher in the maturity stage. Now, if you got started in the growth phase and you made it to the maturity phase, you're probably in good shape and your failure rate's going to be pretty low. But if you are just getting started with a business and you're entering into a mature market, your failure rate is going to be through the roof, obviously. The competition at this stage is pretty high. It's pretty high. And this is, one of the reasons why it hits this level is because the Walmarts of the world and, huge volume buyers, you can either be a volume business or a margin business, right? Do you want to make a little bit of money on a lot of units, or do you want to make a lot of money on a little bit of units? Well, these two, R&D and growth, those are margin markets. This is where margin sellers just destroy it. As you get into maturity and decline, this is where volume sellers dominate the market because, LED light bulbs, selfie sticks, take your pick at the product, iPhone cases. When the market's here, the Walmarts of the world don't want to go out and buy 10 million LED light bulbs, right? They're too scared to do it because the market's too uncertain. It's shaken, right? There's differentiation happening all the time. You could come out with a product feature that completely, eliminates and makes obsolete all the other LED light bulbs out there. So the Walmarts of the world don't want to buy 10 million units in these two stages. Once a market gets to the maturity stage and there's a consistent, predictable sales flow there, that is when the Walmarts of the world will come in. And, if you're buying your product at $10 for 100 pieces, well, once the market gets into maturity, you're going to see the Walmarts of the world come in and say, hey, you know what? You're selling you're selling 100 units for $10 to this guy. I'm Walmart, and here's what I want to do. You give me, I don't know, let's say 10,000 units, right? Which is a small order for Walmart. You give me 10,000 units, and you give them to me at $7 a piece. Now, all of a sudden, you literally cannot compete anymore with this volume seller, and there's nothing left to differentiate, right? So what happens now, of course, is people start to compete on price. You are sitting there with a bunch of products and you're watching Walmart bring the price down and down and down. And this is when price wars begin. And honestly, the demand is also starting to diminish in the maturity phase as well. So this is when you really see markets start to turn, and all of a sudden, it's not a rapidly growing product market where you can, grab market share and build a business. All of a sudden, it's you competing with the products that are on Walmart shelves and things like that. And obviously, that's not what we want to do because they are volume sellers, right? You don't want to go out there into the cheeseburger business, the fast food cheeseburger business, because McDonald's, that volume seller, would just wreck you. There's no margin. So this is really where we start to not like markets. And again, if you start in the growth phase, you can do things, you can capture brand equity, you can get fans that are interested in your brand and prior customers that you can sell more things to. So if you get started in the growth phase, you can easily extend that out. And that's called a product lifecycle extension. You can extend it out through clever branding and just running a good business, which you can absolutely do. But the key is you can't get started in the maturity or the decline phase. That is when things start to really go bad for new people. So the development in the maturity phase is, it's almost non-existent. This is when products become commodities, right? If we think about the smartphone market, right? When smartphones first came out, when Steve Jobs announced the smartphone market on day 0 right here, he said, hey, I got this thing called the iPhone. It's touchscreen. It's got one button. You can do text messaging, music, movies. You can do YouTube videos, internet. This is the smartphone. Well, that was in 2006, right? And what did he launch that against in 2006? These little Blackberries and things like that and Sidekicks. Fast forward to today, the smartphone market has gone through the entire product life cycle. In 2006, you would look at the iPhone next to the next best phone, and they were very, very different. Now, all the changes and all the preferred features have been ironed out, and this is a market in decline. Everyone knows about a smartphone. Most people have them already, so it's just not a growing market anymore. and it's also a commoditized product, right? The Samsung Galaxy S8 is so similar to the iPhone 7 or 8 that it's really a very, very similar product in terms of feature set. When you compare that to what it was like in 2006, the iPhone or the BlackBerry, you see how products morph into that commodity of what is a smartphone. So that's going to happen to everything. That's going to happen to everything. So there's very low development cost here because it's probably a commodity. The consumer kind of knows what they want, right? Do they want a selfie stick with a Bluetooth button or without a Bluetooth button? Well, that's a question when you're growing, but here, people have already made that choice, and it's very clear to the market what features are going to sell and what features aren't, and all of the competitors' products start to look very similar in the maturity and the growth phase. So very low development costs because, again, we're starting to compete on price at this point. People don't want to invest more money into a dying product because it's a dying product, right? They would much rather lower the prices and get the units out of their warehouse. So that's what happens there. Advertising actually goes up in this stage. The reason for that is companies will try to maintain their growth rates, and you just can't because there's literally less customers than there was yesterday. So the advertising expenses per unit go up, and generally the advertising expense in general goes up because companies will start to really try to grab the growth out of there, or they'll get scared and say, man, this is a shrinking market now, and I have 10,000 units in my warehouse, so start bringing the price down a little bit and start advertising because we got to free up this space in the warehouse, right? So that brings us to the decline phase, and the decline phase is obviously somewhere we don't want to operate at all. This is another thing you could call this is the liquidation phase. This is when I have a huge store of products and I got to get rid of them. So now the people that are buying these things at $7 will take them even lower, right? They'll sell it at $10 and literally new people can't get started then. So in the decline phase, when you see demand collapsing, when you see a market that's old news, right? In the decline phase, you're obviously going to see low profitability, if any. A lot of people will lose money here. Failure rate's extremely high. You do not want to get started in a market like this. Competition. The competition is obviously going to be very, very high at this stage. I'm going to put high plus plus, right? This is the stage when so many people bought into it here that there's just warehouses full of these products that, you know, people like me are sitting there saying, we got to free up this warehouse space, get this stuff out at any price possible. So that's why I call it the liquidation phase as well. Obviously, no development at all. This is liquidation, right? Get these things out of here. Advertising is going to be even. Some people like to advertise, some people don't. But when we're liquidating, it's really, let's get it out there at any price because we got to free up space in the warehouse. So that's kind of the product life cycle in a nutshell. I did also want to talk about kind of some products and how they go through the life cycle. We talked about the smartphone market, how, you know, in 2006, the iPhone was very different from the next best smartphone. Fast forward to today, all the smartphones are very similar, and we see companies like Apple running into big financial issues from a stock perspective because investors think that the smartphone market is about to go into decline. So very interesting there. Another product we can look at is electric vehicles, right? For the last 15, 20 years, I've heard about electric vehicles all the time as they were being developed and researched and the market was being educated, but no successful companies came out of that. The most successful thing I saw here was maybe the Prius. But now the electric car market is starting to go into the growth phase. It's no longer a ridiculous product, right? People understand the benefits of electric cars. People understand what the differences are, and there's demand for it now. People kind of want the electric cars. So now we're seeing this go into the growth phase, right? So again, you know, Tesla doesn't do any advertising because the market is growing so quickly that Tesla doesn't need to. And Tesla has very little competition, right? Tesla has, I'm not going to say they have good profitability because, again, Tesla is a big R&D company right now, but their failure rate is low, right? Tesla, it's hard to believe, even though Tesla is a very fragile financial company, it's hard to believe that that brand's going to fail now because there's just so much demand behind it. So you look at a market like that, and obviously that's going to continue to mature, right? We're starting to get into a phase now where other companies like Mercedes and BMW are getting into the electric car market. We see Google getting into the electric car market. We see Apple getting into the electric car market. And what are they doing in the growth phase? They're differentiating through product features. My electric car has autopilot. My electric car does this, right? It's no longer just about gas mileage, it's about all the other features. So we see a chaotic market that is competing for market share through differentiation and through features, and it's probably going to be like that for the next 10, 15 years. But at a certain point, the electric car market will hit maturity, right? Everyone who wants an electric car will have one. All the electric car features will have kind of been tried out, and it'll be pretty common knowledge what features people like and don't like, what features people are willing to pay for and not willing to pay for. So we're going to see a commoditized electric car market here that eventually goes into decline, right? And that's going to take a long time. Another question I get all the time is, how do I know how quickly a product's going to move through the product life cycle? Well, the best way I've found is through the dollar amount of the product, right? So if it's a $5 fidget spinner, well, that can be invented and go into decline within a few months. And that often happens on those low price fad products, right? Fingerboards and all these crazy things, Tamagotchis. These things go from idea to saturation very quickly. You look at something like the electric car market, much different, right? Airplanes, stuff like that. These things take years and years and years to develop, and then they have lots of growth in front of them because the price is so high. So I think based on the price of the product, what people are buying it for, that kind of dictates how quickly we're going to go through the product life cycle. And then the other question I always get is, how do I know where my product is in the life cycle? The best way I've found is to just... It's really an intuition type of thing, but you have to figure out like how differentiated are the products in this market, right? Are we looking at the iPhone next to the BlackBerry, or are we looking at, you know, one flip phone next to the other flip phone? Are we looking at the S8 next to the iPhone, right? How commoditized is this product, and how differentiated are the competing offers? That's one thing you have to look at. So that's kind of the product life cycle in a nutshell. Again, obviously, when you're starting a company, the optimal place to start a company is going to be right there once we get into the growth phase. I don't want to be first to market. I want to be second to market, right? So you don't want to be Google coming out with Google Glasses, because they lost a fortune just figuring out what the hell people wanted, educating the market as to what Google Glasses were and why you should want them. They just lost money. But the people that came in after Google Glasses were very successful. There were people that made specialized Google Glasses for surgery, for sports, for things like that. And those companies are successful, whereas the Google Glasses are not. So you don't want to be first to market. You want to be second to market, right there, ride the growth up, and get market share while you're in this growth phase. Because the maturity phase, you can easily do what's called a product lifecycle extension and continue to build demand for your products and your services, even though the rest of the market is decaying. But the key is you have to start here, capture that customer, build that relationship, and figure out how to extend that lifecycle through, other upsells or product line extensions and things like that. So guys, that is the product life cycle, and hopefully it was very helpful for you. Again, I think this is one of the most important things to think about when you're first starting a company or selling a new product. You have to think about the general market and where this product is in its life cycle. So hopefully this helps, and hopefully you can use this perspective when you're starting your company. Guys, if you want to see us make more of these videos, subscribe, give us a like, and also let me know in the comments what you want to see me do on this board next. So hopefully that helped, guys. Product Lifecycle, Will Mitchell, StartupBros.com.